All right, this is Mr. Gillum, and today what we're going to do is learn how to multiply and divide signed decimals. All right, so most of this just review. The main thing we got to learn and keep in mind is that when you multiply or divide two positives, you get a positive, or when you multiply two negatives, or divide two negatives, you get a positive outcome. If you have different signs, your outcome will be negative, like a positive and negative or a negative and positive. And those rules just apply for products and quotients, or multiplication and division. So that's the important thing we're going to really emphasize today. Everything else should be hopefully a nice little review for you. All right, when we're multiplying signed decimals, that just means we might have, instead of taking 3.5 times 4.2, one of them will be negative. And so now, the only thing that changes from what we know in the past is that our outcome will be negative. All right, so we're going to use the product rules. The product rules to determine the sign of the product. And the product rules say positive times a positive equals a positive. Negative times a negative equals a positive. If you have a positive and a negative, your outcome will be negative, or if you have a negative and a positive, your outcome will be negative. Okay, so in this case, our answer would be negative. But we're going to have plenty of examples to actually multiply to remember how we're doing this. So let's just start with some basic ones here. 3.2 times negative 4.3. So what I know right now is I have a positive number times a negative number. So my outcome is going to be negative. So before I do anything, I'm just going to write that down just so I don't forget. And now it's just a matter of taking my multiplication. Okay. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. And then this is the part where I see a lot of students forget. We need a little placeholder there for 0. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. And now we're going to add that up. 6, 17, 3, 1. And now the tricky part is where we place our decimal. Because I have one decimal place, two decimal places total in my question, I'm going to have two decimal places total in my answer. So my final answer is going to be 13.76. Negative 13.76. All right, let's do another one. In this case, I have a negative times a negative, so I know my outcome is going to be positive. So I'm not going to write plus because we don't write plus in front of positive numbers. We just know they're positive. So what we're going to do is we're just going to multiply again. 4.32 times 2.7. And so first things first, I'm going to take 7 times 2, 14. 7 times 3 is 21, plus 1 is 22. 7 times 4 is 28, 29, 30. And now I'm adding, and I need a placeholder for my 0. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 4 is 8. And I add these numbers together. 4 plus 0 is 4. 2 plus 4 is 6. 0 plus 6 is 6. 8 plus 3 is 11. So there we go. Now, don't forget, this is important as well. We have 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So I'm going to move it 1, 2, 3 decimal places. I know my outcome is positive because a negative times a negative is positive. So I'm going to say 11.664. And there you go. Now, you should also, when you're moving your decimal, use your brain a little bit. If I round this to 4 and I round this to 3, 4 times 3 is 12. And that's pretty close to what we have. Same way over here. 3 times 4 is about 12, and we're pretty close to 12. Now, if I had moved the decimal too many places, 1 would not be close to 12, or 137 would not be close to 12. So just keep that in mind when you're multiplying and see if your answer makes sense. So you make sure you move your decimal place the right amount. A positive times a negative will give me a negative outcome. So I'm going to take 0.12 times 3.1. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. My placeholder. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. Now I'm adding. 2 plus 0 is 2. 1 plus 6 is 7. And 3 plus 0 is 3. I have 1, 2, 3 decimal points. 1, 2, 3 decimal points. So my answer is actually negative 0.372. Okay? Hopefully review. If not, I hope you're picking it up. We'll do one more multiplication, and we're going to go on to division. In this case, I have a negative times a negative, so once again, my answer is going to be positive. I'm not going to write a plus because we know it'll be positive. I'm just going to take 1.4 times 0.2. And you could do 0.2 times 1.4, same thing. And I don't really need the 0 in front. That's not necessary. So what I can do is I can just start multiplying. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 1 is 2. And that's it. That's the whole thing. So in this case, I just have 1, 2 decimals, 1, 2. 0.28 is my solution. Negative times a negative is a positive, so I'm good there. 0.28. All right. Let's take a look at division now. When we divide sign decimals, our rules still don't change for as far as positives and negatives go, and as far as what we're actually dividing. You're going to move the decimal point in the divisor to make it a whole number. We're going to move the decimal point in the divisor to the right or left, as long as it's a whole number, and then move the decimal point in the dividend the same amount, then place on top. Okay, so it's telling you when we'll go over that in here in a second. Use your quotient rules again, and those are the same as the product rules for multiplication and division. Positive divided by a positive is a positive. Positive divided by negative is a negative. Negative and positive. Okay, so let's just take a look here. When I'm dividing, the first number, the 25.2, goes on the inside of my division bar. And then I have negative 0.2 on the outside. So what I want to do is I'm going to actually move the decimal point until this is a whole number. I'm going to move it one spot this time. I'm going to put my decimal point. And now I'm dividing. I'm thinking, how many times does 2 go into 2? It goes in once. So now I subtract. 1 times 2 is 2. 0 left, and I carry down my 5. How many times does 2 go into 5? Twice. Minus 2 times 2 is 4. 5 minus 4 is 1. And I bring down my 2. How many times does 2 go into 12? 6 times. Oops. Put that on the wrong side of the decimal. 6 times. And so 6 times 2 is 12. I have no remainder at all, so 126.0, also known as 126. However, we have a positive and a negative, so I know my solution will be negative. All right. Take a look at the next one here. Negative 7.29. I'm not going to write the negative in there. I think it's going to be confusing. We're just going to write 7.29 divided by 9. And in this case, I have a negative divided by negative, so I know my outcome will be positive. So as I'm looking at this, I need to make sure, since I don't need to make this a whole number, we're good to go. I just make sure my decimal point's right there. Stays right where it's at. 9 doesn't go into 7, so I'm going to have to start with a 0. And so now I'm looking at how many times does 9 go into 72? Well, I know that goes in 8 times. So now when I subtract, 8 times 9 is 72. Leaves me with 0. And I bring down my 9. 9 goes into 9 one time, and 1 times 9 is 9. Leaving me with a remainder of 0 again. Now I know my answer is 0.81 because I have a negative divided by a negative. And if you think about it, 9 shouldn't go into the 7 at one time. It should be less than 1. So 0.81 makes sense. Right, 2 more to go. If I divide a negative by a positive, I'll have a negative outcome. So I'm just going to put that negative sign there to remind myself. 1.15 divided by 0.5. Now I want this outside number to be a whole number, so I'm going to move the decimal place once. And I'll do the same underneath my division sign. 5 does not go into 1 at all, but 5 does go into 11 twice. So 2 times 5 is 10. I'm going to subtract 10. Leaves me with 1. 11 minus 10 is 1. And I bring down my 5. 5 goes into 15 3 times. And 3 times 5 is 15. That's what I'm subtracting. And once again, no remainder. So that's good. So a half does go into whole twice and a little more. So that would make sense of our answer. But a negative divided by a positive is a negative. 2.3. Okay. And last but not least, 4.20 divided by 0.07. Now, I see a positive divided by a negative, so I know my solution is going to be negative. And I need to go ahead and move this decimal place a couple spots. I want this outside number to be a whole number. So now I'm thinking, how many times does 7 go into 4? None. But it does go into 42 6 times. 6 times 7 is 42. Carry down my 0. How many times does 7 go into 0? 0 times. 0 times 7, 0. There we go. And I know to stop because I'm just going to keep getting zeros and zeros and zeros. So it's important that we have our decimal point in the right spot, because once we get that 0 down there, we're going to be tempted to think that, oh, well, once we get 0, we're done. But really, we need as many zeros as it takes to get to the decimal point. So my actual answer is going to be negative 60. Okay, so just make sure you get that decimal point on there. And if you end up with 0 for our after our subtraction for our difference, you need to make sure that we make it all the way to the decimal point before we finish our problem. And we could keep going, but if I just keep putting zeros behind it, it's never going to end. So that would be silly. So we stop at 60, negative 60. Okay, so that's how you multiply and divide signed decimals. And we're going to practice in class. That's all for today.